Hi Rasmus users. Today we're going to walk through session note templates and how to create them for your organization. This is something that only users currently with manager level access within your organization have the ability to do. Our session notes are super customizable, so let's start by just walking through a couple of the elements that go into creating a session note. So if you want to pull in client information into your session notes, that's really easily done. One of the things that I recommend doing if there's custom information that you want to collect for your client in a session, you'll need to set up client data fields. So these client data fields, if we click on the Clients tab here and we click into a client profile, you'll have your basic client data fields here. And we've got our client named SpongeBob SquarePants. We can see their basic, just out of the box, address, date of birth information, their reference ID, which you can fill out to be whatever you want. But we also have this information tab here. This is where custom client data fields can be set up, and then they'll be filled out for each individual client. So if you'd like to assign, who your supervising BCBA is, who a parent or guardian is, if you want to specify their payer, their diagnosis code, all of this information that can be pulled into note templates and also report templates lives right here. I'll show you where you're going to set these up in just a second. Just a couple of things that you want to note is that these user fields that we have set up right here, these have to be set up in order to collect additional signatures on your note template. So we'll show you what that looks like too. So I'm going to click Save, and we're going to go down to Organization, Client Data, and you can see here, this is where I've created those data fields. So I've set up a field called Diagnosis Code, Supervising BCBA, Parent/Guardian, and Primary Payer. There's different types of fields that you can set up here, and all of these, once you've created them, you'll be able to pull them into a note template or a report template, and they'll be filled out automatically based on the client that you're generating that note or that report for. So to access our session notes, we've actually moved them recently, so they're now under Settings, Templates, Notes. A couple of quick things is you can also set up some layout settings for your organization. So this will apply to all session notes. So if we decide that we want a standard header and footer for our organization, we can do that. Those fields that I mentioned, for example, those client fields here, or if you want to pull information specific to session notes, so you can include like a page count or the current page. So if I wanted to put for example, in my footer or in my header, even if I wanted to include a page count in there, then you could do that. If I wanted to have like page count current page out of the total page count, that's something that people like to do as well, so that if you export your notes, then that information can be there. But this is how you would set up a standard header and footer across all notes within your organization. I'm going to click Save. To create a new note template, you'll come here. You'll select the specific activity type that you'd like it to be associated with. You can have more than one, so it could be for a session and supervision. All of these are more related to those sort of like staff-only activities, but these can be applied to clients too. But a session is what you're generally going to run with a client, and then supervision is you can specify a supervision activity as well. So you can call your template whatever you want it here in the template name. So if we wanted to call this a supervision SOAP note, then we can go ahead and do that. I'm actually going to show you guys how to complete these session note templates from one that I've already started. But that's how you fill out the basic information to get started on your actual note template. So I'll save that one, and let's take a look at this direct service session note that I've already started. So from here, you can see I've set my activity type, I've set up my template name, I've put some formatting on here, so I've called this the direct service session note. One thing I want to show you is how to add a logo to your session note if you want to. You always want to use this insert image option here. And then you're going to select the file that you would like to include as your logo. Oh, and I got an error message saying that that was an unsupported image. So that's what will happen if the image that you're trying to upload is not supported. Let me find a better logo to upload. Okay, so I'm going to select insert image, and there we go. We have this PNG file that is now going to serve as our logo on our session note. And now we know it's a supported image. It's not going to cause any issues if we try to export this note or try to send it to an integration, because we've used the insert image button to add that in there. So let's go through and see what I've done on the note so far. So I've added a table. You can just do this by selecting a table, hit insert table, and then you can select how many rows and columns, and you can also toggle on or off whether or not you want a header row. If I click into a table and select the dropdown, all of these options here will apply to the current table that I'm on. So if I want to add a column, delete a column, merge or split cells, toggle on a header row, all of that good stuff will apply to the table that I'm using. And you can apply many different tables within your note template. You can also do bullets, numbering, and select if you want something to be center or left or on the right of a page. These purple blocks right here are my dynamic fields that I've added to my session note. Dynamic fields are great because it makes it super easy for the person who's generating the session note once they're completing their session to really quickly and accurately fill out their note. So let's start with the ones that I added here at the beginning. So to add in dynamic fields, we're going to select dynamic fields, and you're going to see that there's a number of categories here. If we want to choose a field related to the client profile, so those are those two tabs that I showed you on the client profile page, we're going to click the drop down here, and you're going to see we have all these different options, including the ones that I added custom, like parent/guardian, primary payer. So if I want to go ahead and add that primary payer field into my session note, I'm going to select that there. Now, I'll show you what this looks like in just a second here, but basically what the note will look like is you'll see all of the information that I've input, and then all of this purple stuff will show up actually as the text related to that specific client. One thing I want to point out is this username field here. I'm actually going to remove it and re-add it so you can see what I did. So if you want to include the provider name, the person who actually completed the session, you're going to want to select session and then username. What you actually don't want to do is use the username field here, because then if somebody else goes in and edits that note at any point, it'll actually add their username to the note instead of the person who actually completed the session. So for all of these different categories here, there are a few different dynamic fields that you can add. And I'll also show you in just a second how we can create our own. Under the appointment tab, if you use our basic scheduling functionality, you can actually pull in some of these various fields as well. And if you use a Lumery integration, then these fields will actually update based on the appointment that your activity is linked to. So if you're not using our scheduling and you're not using an integration, there's not a whole lot you can actually do with these appointment fields. So I just want to point that out to you. So let's talk about how you're actually going to create custom fields within your session note. So we're going to do this by selecting Add Custom Field. In this one, we're going to create a field called Session Location, or you can call it Place of Service, or whatever you want to title this field. The hint is what's going to show up for the user. So you can put a question to help them, guide them in filling out this field. So where did session take place? And then you can choose the different field types. So if you want it to be a text field where they free text, type it in, you can select that it has to be a number. You can create selection options. This can be a date, or you can actually pull from the list of client fields. There's a few things that you'll learn about in actually in forms related to the client fields. I'm not going to go into that right now on this field type for session notes. You can also pull in a session data table, and we'll get to that in just a second. For this one, we're going to create selection. So we're just going to add these options: home, center, community, school, telehealth. You can make it so that they are able to select multiple selections or just one. So we can create, basically this is going to be a check boxes that they fill out to select exactly where session took place, and then that will appear on the session note. We can set this as a required field. And the other thing is that you can save it to the field library. So if you want to use that in other notes, we do have to put this in a category. So we're going to put it in the session category. I'm going to select save. And then if I ever want to access this field again, I'm going to go into dynamic fields. I'm going to find my category it's in, and we can know the custom ones because it's going to have a pencil icon next to it. So I can hit my pencil icon and go back in and edit my field. Now, one of the things about creating them so that you can use them across the organization is you can also pull that into activities reporting as well. We're going to create one more custom field just to show you how that's done. We'll actually do a couple more in this note, but for this one, I'm also going to add a custom field for the session participants. So we can call this session participants, and we can say who participated in session. And this one, we're actually going to do a multi-select. So we'll allow for multiple selections, and we'll say RBT, BCBA, speech therapist, parent, sibling, other. And the output format is going to be bullet points. So if they select multiple, it's going to show up as bullet points in the note. I'm going to make it required, and I'm also going to save this to the field library as well, and we'll put it under the session and hit save. Now the session start times and finish times, including these in your notes, will actually allow users to edit their start and finish time when they're filling out the note. If you have disabled them in the user privileges from being able to change their start and finish times, it'll still include it in the note. It'll just be grayed out for them while they're filling out their note. So we'll see what this looks like in just a second. So I'm going to select start time and finish time, and this will default to the actual start and finish times of when they started and finished their session timer. But then this does allow them the ability to change that if they need to. We can also include session duration as a really popular one as well. The session narrative field is something that a lot of organizations also tend to include. So we'll add a custom field for that. We'll call it session narrative. And you can choose to, whatever you want to hint your users with. So we can say what happened during session today. Describe in at least 3 sentences. And then we can make this a free text field, and we can also allow multi-line text. And we're going to save that to the field library as well. Now, the final field type that I'm going to create is a session data field. These are really cool because we can actually include our data from the session in the session note itself. So we do have to create a custom field for this, and we'll call this session data. You don't need to have a hint here. You'll just select the session data table, and then you can select the actual content that's generated for each of these categories. So if we want to include an actual table within our session note, we can specify that we want to include the program's introductory date, the number of trials, and the session outcomes. We can also include the program notes, and then if there was a supervisor using supervision mode during that session, we can also choose to include the supervisor notes. I am, of course, going to save this to the field library as well and put this under session and hit save. And now we have a place where the session data is going to live on my note. So we've gone through and we have created a note with a combination of dynamic fields and custom fields. You saw how quick and easy that was. And now we have a really nicely formatted, beautiful session note. A couple other things about our notes before we go ahead and preview what this note is going to look like. You can set this up to require a signature from the person who's completing the note. We can also require a signature from additional people, and that is going to require that you have client data fields set up of the user type. So remember, we created those user fields for the client data information section. So if we want to require a parent guardian signature, then we can set that up as well. We can also lock this from manual editing. And what that means is that all they will be able to do is fill out the custom fields that you've created, and then the dynamic fields will also be used to populate the note. They will not be able to type anywhere in the body of the note, just like this, while they're actually completing their note. If you leave this unchecked, they will be able to add information to the actual body of the note, either during session or when they're finished session and completed when they're in the process of completing their session note. Okay, so now that we have completed our session note, all that's left is to preview it and test it out. So you can preview your note at any time. You do have to have a client in a session already set up. So when I click preview, this is going to show me what it's going to look like for a user filling out the note. But in order to get the full experience of completing the note, you can save the note and then you can run a quick session with a client. So I am going to start this session. I'm going to hit start here. This button right here in a session is where I can pull up my note at any time. If I have the privileges to be able to select my own session note, I can select my note. Otherwise, you can default a particular note to a session and make it so they can't select their own. So that makes it so they'll have to select the correct note. But I can begin filling out my note during my actual session, save this, finish my session, and finish up my note, continue through. If I had taken any data during that session, this is where that session data would show up. I'll hit continue here, and I will adjust my times through the start and finish time fields here. If I had it set up in the user privileges so that I could not adjust my times, these would be grayed out. I'm going to hit continue, and then you can see here that this is where we have those dynamic fields that are populating information, such as the primary payer, the fields I filled out, such as the session location and the participants, start and end time and duration, my session narrative, no session data because I didn't take any, but if I did, this is where it would live. Now I just have to sign my note. And we did set this up to collect an additional signature. So I do have that parent guardian field added to the client. It's not filled out, so it's not sending a signature request to a particular user, but we do have a great video on our knowledge base that goes over collecting parent and guardian signatures specifically on your session notes. But that pretty much sums up our process of creating session note templates in Hi Rasmus. I hope you enjoyed the video.